Thank you very much, Mr. Sires. Mr. Chabot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have several measures before us today, so I won't get to all of them, but I'd just like to focus on a few. First, as the one of the founders and co-chairs of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, I want to voice my strong support for Mr. Curtis's Taipei Act. Taiwan is a critical ally in the Pacific and ought to be a role model for other nations across the globe. Last month, the Solomon Islands and Kiribati switched diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. The Taipei Act seeks to discourage other countries from making that same mistake. Unfortunately, these changes are part of a concerted Chinese campaign. Since President Tsai was elected, Beijing has sought to undermine her presidency, to intimidate the Taiwanese people, and has increased its efforts to close Taiwan off from the international community. Helping Taiwan maintain its sovereignty in the face of this onslaught demonstrates our commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. The Taipei Act also raises a critical question. Why don't we just go ahead and recognize Taiwan? The Taiwanese people don't want to be part of the PRC, and who can blame them after we've seen China's blatant disregard for the rights of Hong Kong people over the past several months? Furthermore, if you pick any mark of sovereignty, whether it's in economic, diplomatic, military, or governance domains, it's pretty clear that Taiwan has all of them. It's pretty obvious that Taiwan is an independent country to anybody who looks at the facts, and it's well past time that U.S. policy caught up with these facts. Moving on from Taiwan, I'd also like to briefly voice my support for three other bills that I'm co-sponsoring that we have before us today. First, the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, the House version of which was introduced by my good friend Chris Smith. And thank you, Chris, for your leadership on this and so many other issues over the years. China's inhumane treatment of the Uyghurs is completely dystopian and horrific. This legislation is critical to holding the Chinese government and officials to account for their campaign of abuse and mass arbitrary detention inflicted on the Uyghurs. Second, Mr. Wilson's Saudi Education Transparency and Reform Act, and I want to thank him for his leadership on this committee over the years as well, is a necessary step to ensure that Saudi textbooks do not encourage violence against non-Muslim religions. Third, HRES 349 reaffirms our commitment to our alliance with Japan. The partnership between our two great nations is essential to peace and security in Asia and really across the globe. It's also one of the best demonstrations that former enemies can put aside their hatred and build up an enduring, mutually beneficial friendship. As we face the threat of a rising China, seek to support democratic values and human rights, and work to bring economic development to the region, this alliance is critical to meeting our shared objectives. And unfortunately, the relationship between the United States and Japan oftentimes gets overlooked nowadays. It shouldn't. It's one of those that's so important to both countries, to the region, and to the world, and ought to be an example of how former enemies really can get along to the mutual benefit of both societies. So I would urge my colleagues to support these and a number of the other pieces of legislation before us. Thank the chairman and the ranking member for their leadership, and yield back.